Imagine a world scarred by centuries of fear, a world where darkness had grown, slowly and silently, until it almost consumed everything. And then, the final war. The One Ring was destroyed, the Dark Tower of Barad-dûr fell, the armies of Mordor were scattered, Sauron, the Dark Lord, was finally defeated. But the fall of a tyrant does not mean that the world heals overnight. It does not mean that the wounded recover instantly. Middle-earth, after the war, was not the same. Peace, no matter how much it was desired, did not come without scars. And now, with Sauron gone, one question remained: what happened next? The rise of the kingdom of Gondor and Arnor. With Sauron defeated, a new king ascended the throne. Aragorn, now Elisar, king of Gondor and Arnor, brought hope and justice. But rebuilding a kingdom was no easy task. Gondor lay in ruins, its people decimated by war. The north was forgotten. Arnor, the land of the ancient kings, was nothing but a wasteland of abandoned fortresses. The threat of rebellion and instability was real. Many had once served the darkness. Yet Aragorn was no ordinary king. He was the heir of Isildur, yes, but he was also a man shaped by suffering, by decades of struggle, learning and wisdom. And so, he did not rule only as a king, but as a guardian of his people. The reconstruction of Minas Tirith, the White City, Minas Tirith, was now the heart of the kingdom, but its walls, its towers, its streets bore the scars of war. And it took time, effort and hope to restore its former glory. Homes were rebuilt, the wounded were cared for. The White Tree bloomed once more, symbolizing a new beginning. And under Aragorn's reign, Gondor shone again, reclaiming its strength and influence. The restoration of Arnor and the return of the Northern Kings. But Gondor was not the only kingdom to rise again. Arnor, the long-forgotten kingdom of the Dúnedain of the North, also rose from the ashes. With peace, Aragorn sent settlers and restored its ancient fortresses. Anúminas, the lost capital, was rebuilt. The wandering Dúnedain finally had a home again. The North became once more a pillar of civilization, and so, for the first time in centuries, Gondor and Arnor stood united under a single king. The empire of men would never be the same again. The free peoples, the fate of the elves, dwarves, and hobbits, but Middle-earth did not belong to men alone. The other peoples faced their own destinies, and not all of them had a happy ending. The elves' farewell, the sorrowful departure to the west, the victory over Sauron, was not a blessing for the elves. It marked the end of their era. Middle-earth was no longer their home. The great elven realms faded Lothlórien. The sorrowful departure to the west, the victory over Sauron, was not a blessing for the elves. It marked the end of their era. Middle-earth was no longer their home. The great elven realms faded Lothlórien and grew silent. Its light dimming, Rivendell became an empty place, with no wise lords to guide it. The Solvinwar ports became filled with farewells, as the last ships sailed into the west. Galadriel, Elrond, Legolas, and many others departed, leaving only memories behind. The elves were leaving forever, and Middle-earth became, little by little, a world of men. The dwarves, the last flicker beneath the mountains. The dwarves, on the other hand, did not leave, but their people were in decline. Moria was still lost, infested by orcs and darkness. The great city of Erebor thrived, but their numbers dwindled with each generation. The dwarven clans remained isolated, growing ever fewer, and over time, the great halls of stone grew quiet, and the hammers of the forges rang out less and less. The age of the dwarves would not end suddenly, but they too were fading. The Shire, the last piece in Middle-earth, and the hobbits, they never sought glory, never pursued war, and so they were the most fortunate. The Shire recovered, the fields flourished, the taverns filled with laughter again. The long-awaited peace finally arrived for the small folk of Middle-earth. But for Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, nothing would ever be the same. They had seen war face terrors no hobbit should ever know. But for Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, nothing would ever be the same. They had seen war face terrors no hobbit should ever know. And Frodo, the ring-bearer, never found peace. That is why, in the end, he left for the west, leaving the Shire behind forever. The legacy of war and the new Middle-earth, the War of the Ring, did not destroy the world, but it changed everything. The kingdom of men grew and flourished. The elves disappeared into the sea. The dwarves became living legends. The Shire remained hidden and happy. Middle-earth became a new world. The shadow never completely fades, the end of Sauron, but not of evil. The victory over Sauron should have been the definitive end of darkness. The One Ring was destroyed. The armies of Mordor were crushed. The lands of the Dark Lord lay in ruins. But evil never truly disappears. For the shadow can be defeated, but it is never truly erased. It hides, it waits, it transforms. And Middle-earth, even after the fall of the Dark Lord, was not free from threats, because there are always those who still serve the darkness, and always those who wish for its return. The last servants of darkness, evil without a master, Sauron, was destroyed, but his legacy was not erased. Many of his followers did not fall with him. Orcs and Uruk-hai still roamed forgotten ruins and dark caves. The Southrons and Easterlings, peoples who had sworn loyalty to Sauron, still hated Gondor and the kingdoms of men. The lingering specters of fear and corruption still whispered in the hearts of the weak and the ambitious. Sauron may have been defeated, but the evil he spread still ran through the world. And that meant that the war was never truly over. The fate of the orcs' creatures, without a master, the orcs had always been Sauron's most loyal creatures, not out of love, not out of devotion, but because he was their absolute master. They were created in darkness, forged to serve, to wage war, to destroy. But now they were alone, without a leader to guide them, without a purpose to follow, without a central force to unite them. And so, chaos spread among them. Many killed each other, fighting for power in the shadows. Others became mere raiders, terrorizing small villages and travelers on forgotten roads. Some tried to flee, hiding in mountains and caves, waiting for the day when a new Dark Lord would rise. But one thing was certain: the orcs would never be completely gone. They were a plague that would always return, even if it took centuries. The risk of corrupt men. The orcs were a real danger, even if it took centuries. The risk of corrupt men. The orcs were a real danger, but men themselves also carried the seed of darkness. For not all served Sauron out of fear. Some followed him by choice. The Haradrim, the riders of the Mirmakil, still harbored hatred against Gondor. The Easterlings, warriors of the East, lost their leader, but not their ambition. Many nobles and soldiers who once served Mordor still believed in its power and dreamed of a new Dark Lord. And what happens when an empire of evil loses its king? The factions fight for the throne, and new shadows begin to rise. But cursed relics, remnants of the power of darkness. The One Ring was destroyed, but not all dark relics were lost. The other rings of power still existed, lost or hidden. Weapons forged in dark times still carried the essence of evil. Artifacts left behind by Sauron in ruins scattered across Middle-earth could tempt the ambitious and the foolish. For evil does not need a body to survive. It can live in an object, in a whisper, in an ancient secret, and all it would take is one fool to find one of these relics. For the shadow to begin rising once more, the corruption of the heart, the greatest danger of all. But the greatest danger was never the orcs. It was never the weapons or the armies of darkness. The greatest danger was always within the hearts of men. For evil does not need Sauron to live. It only needs the ambition of men, their thirst for power, their will to dominate others. It needs someone with fear, someone with desire, someone who wants more than they deserve. And as long as there is a human heart that is weak and ambitious, evil will always have a way back. Will the shadow return? History has shown us that evil never truly dies. Morgoth fell, and Sauron took his place. Sauron fell, and his ashes still spread darkness. And one day, perhaps in a distant time, perhaps when kings are distracted, perhaps when the stories of the War of the Ring become nothing more than forgotten legends, the shadow may return, and then our Earth will have to fight once more. For the price of peace is the eternal vigilance against darkness. Conclusion: the war never truly ends. The Dark Lord was defeated, but the fight against darkness never truly ends. The shadow dissipates, yes, but there is always an echo, a fragment, a remnant that waits in the dark. For evil does not need a body. It lives in whispers. It hides in hearts. It waits for the right moment to return. And Middle-earth, no matter how peaceful it may seem now, will never be completely safe. For as long as power exists, as long as ambition exists, as long as there are those who desire more than they deserve, the shadow will always have a way back. And when that day comes, who will rise to face it? For as long as ambition exists, as long as there are those who desire more than they deserve, the shadow will always have a way back. And when that day comes, who will rise to face it?